Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Smalley. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Services here at the Coordinating Board. And welcoming a big group today. We have different stakeholders on the line that are interested in learning about some of these programs that we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much for coming on. To go over our agenda today, we will be briefly discussing some state financial aid resource updates that we sent out, discussing some deadlines and some events that we have coming our way. But the main topic of today's discussion is going to be exemption and waiver resources. And I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of the Good Neighbor program. So we did flip-flop the agenda a little bit to allow those that maybe from a private institution or another area to decide if they want to learn about the exemption and waiver programs. So I encourage everyone to stay on and learn as much as possible, but I did flip-flop the agenda this time to accommodate that. So let's get started. The first thing that I wanted to go through today was some state financial aid resource updates. Last month on January 27th, we sent out a memo that outlined some changes or updates that we wanted to make schools aware of. I'm going to actually show you the memo so that we can go over these items in more detail. So let me pull that up. It's supposed to load for me, but it did not work. So this is the memo. And some of the things that we released now is the Spring 2000 calendar. It's going to have upcoming deadline, target dates, and closure dates for the Coordinating Board for financial aid services purposes. We also announced the loan automation that went into effect that basically moves all of the loans, the state loan programs, through the application process automatically. It no longer requires a manual review. So that's a big change for the institutions because it's going to allow y'all to certify faster and so that students can receive their funding hopefully faster. So you'll be able to read about that here. Another change that happened is on the HH Loans webpage, there used to be an institution link available, and to consolidate websites and make sure that we're not duplicating information, that link was removed. So as of the beginning of this last month in January, you will no longer see that page. It's completely gone. We moved any resource associated with that page onto the Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, so you'll still be able to get the same information. It's just in a central location, which is on our loan programs webpage. Towards the holidays in December, we made the announcement for financial aid database. So the manual is now available. It's located on our webpage and also in the memo. You'll want to take a look at that because it has the deadline dates in it, and it also talks about some of the data element updates that were made. And since FADS is opening up here soon for 1920, you will want to make sure that you get a copy of the manual and any of the updates associated with that. Grant payments. The grant payment process, if you participate in Texas Grant, TEOG, or TEG, you'll know we implemented a new program last year to request and return funding. And one of the things that the institutions asked for kind of over and over when we were out in the field is, you know, it would be nice to get an email confirmation. So that was put into production. And so now whenever you send a request for funds, you'll not only get an email when you submit it, but also once it's been approved, and then also if you return any funds. So that is an enhancement that was added. It went into effect a few weeks ago, so hopefully those of you who process funding are starting to get those notifications. Another thing that was added to our website, not only on College for All Texans, but on our Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, is a scholarship statement to confirm that a student is not in the third degree of consanguinity or the second degree of affinity. I believe I said that right. Yes. This is required for certain scholarships at the institution. So if you're not familiar with this, I recommend that you go out and read to make sure that if you need to be collecting this statement for scholarship recipients, that you have this on file. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us to get more information. And then lastly, exemption and waivers. I'm going to be going through this in detail, so I'm not going to go through it on this, but if you have questions on this memo or anything related to it, I'm going to show you how to send those questions over to us. But first, I'm going to talk about some upcoming deadlines and events. First and foremost, Be On Time loan certification. We sent out a notice letting schools know that if you have any eligible students and you are not provided an allocation for this final year, you may have an opportunity to request funding after the February 20th deadline. If you have funding that you are allocated, you do have to certify those loans by February 20th, which is next week. So we wanted to make sure you know Be On Time is ending. So this is really y'all's last chance to make sure you identify any last kiddos that might be in school so that you can get their loans certified. We also sent out an opt-in, opt-out survey. This is something that we collect each year from all institutions. The deadline for that is February 28th, and it relates to the 4 programs that are listed, which is Texas College Work Study Student Mentorship, Educational Aid Exemption, and Tuition Equalization Grant. For each of these programs, all institutions, the Director of Financial Aid or higher, has to complete this survey online to indicate whether they're going to participate or not. If it's a program that does not relate to your school, for example, if it's only for public schools, it does say on the form, but you would need to indicate an NA or not applicable on there so that we have each of the responses. If you have questions on the survey or where to find it or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us and we can walk you through that. It was released in a notification on February 3rd. The Good Neighbor recommendations, which I'm going to go through at the end of this presentation. The deadline's March 15th, so please mark your calendars for that. The portal does shut down on that day. So we won't accept any applications after March 15th. Some upcoming training. Those of you that are familiar with TASFA, that's the Texas Association, they will be hosting their annual regional trainings. They're having 5 this year. They have Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, Lubbock, and El Paso. They have released all the dates for those, which is on their website, and the coordinating board will be participating this year in those trainings to deliver updates to state programs. So if you're going to that, we will see you there, and if you're not, we try and communicate all information through these webcasts now. And so the next webcast is March 10th. So we will be sending out topics and letting you know what we're going to be presenting on. If you can't make it to regional, then we should be able to cover those topics on a webcast. Some updates. The state grant award amounts were released last week on February 3rd. So if you have not received those, they are posted online under our Stay Connected page under the memos. We released for all 3 grant programs in 2 separate memos. The Texas grant and TEOG are in one memo, and the TEG program is in a separate one. Something else that we just updated on our webpage, and I'm going to pull this up for y'all to see, is we created a tuition set-aside page because one of the things that is required in statute is that the coordinating board provides schools the uniform standards for how to inform students and disclosing that set aside to students. So this is a brand new page. Many of you may not have even seen it yet. Let me backtrack a little and show you exactly where it's saved. Under program resources, we created a tuition set aside. So when you click on that, it's going to explain the requirement, exactly what you need to do to make sure that when you are putting money aside for the designated tuition, that you're informing students in the correct way and you're calculating that in the correct way. So now we have a formula in here. We show you exactly how to do it with an example, and we have all the related resources over here on the right hand side. So go out and take a look at that, and you can always contact us if you have questions. FADs will be opening, so please keep an eye out for that. We'll be sending the notice out as soon as it's available. And questions on any of the stuff that we talk about throughout this presentation, and specifically what we just talked about with all these updates, we do have a contact us link. I've kind of reiterated this over and over again on prior webcasts that if you have a question, this really is the best way to get in touch with us so that we can research and get back to you in writing. On all of our correspondence, web pages, guidelines, anything we release, there is a contact us link hyperlinked on there, for example, up here. When you click on that, it's going to have a little menu over here that you have to fill out. Some of the critical pieces are make sure that you put that it's from an institution. When you type in your name here, that helps us route it to the appropriate person. And then the contact reason is critical because financial aid question is how it gets to our area. Any other selection in this dropdown gets routed throughout the agency, and it could take a day, sometimes 2 days or longer to get over to us, and so it delays us getting back to you. So make sure that you enter that on there every single time if it's related to something that we send out. The description also helpful. The more details, the better. Obviously, with student information, please don't include social security numbers. You can include the last 4, but the more information you can provide, the better. And you can always request a callback if you feel like it's something that you want to discuss in person. We can do that as well. Now, in the event you just have something quick or you feel like you really just want to talk to somebody about it, we have a dedicated institutional phone line. As a reminder, it is only for institutions. We're finding that sometimes students, they find it on our website. It's inevitable, but definitely we're trying to make sure institutions have this dedicated resource. So if you can make sure it's not posted to any of your web pages or any of your correspondence, that will help us ensure we're available for institutions, because we do have a dedicated student line for loan borrowers and for the general public, and I'll go over that at the end of the presentation. So I just wanted to throw these 2 resources out for questions. We're here for you. We want to make sure that we're addressing anything that you come across as needing some help or some clarification. Okay, so here's where we move on. That was our kind of general updates. I am going to start talking about exemption and waiver resources. Since exemption and waivers only apply to public schools, I just wanted to make that announcement. And if you're from a private, please stay on to learn about these programs. You never know when you may pop over to a private school, or just you may in your personal life have this impact you. And there are so many exemption and waiver programs available. It's a very, very good thing to be informed about, because you never know who you're going to be able to help with one of these programs. So getting started, this past year, the Financial Aid Services Department was tasked to evaluate what we have for exemption and waivers and to come up with some new resources or ways to communicate to the schools and to provide training. So my area did an assessment, and we came up with 6 primary programs that we were going to focus on to start with. And the 6 programs include children of disabled or deceased firefighters and law enforcement officers, the education benefits for certain survivors, firefighters enrolled in fire science courses, Good Neighbor program, peace officers and firefighters disabled in the line of duty, and peace officers enrolled in certain courses. And as you can see a theme here, a lot of them have to do with peace officers or law enforcement officers or firefighters, and we did that intentionally because there's a lot of overlapping concepts and things there that we'll go over in a minute, but we tried to group these together to be the most logical, and we also did ones that we get the most questions on. So if you're familiar with exemption waivers, there are over 50 programs. We only have 6 here. We are working to review the next group and figure out what kind of resources we're going to produce. Each one is so different and unique that we're kind of bouncing around on ideas on how we're going to best communicate things. We have things such as fact sheets, website updates. We've created program guidelines. So I'm going to go through some of those today with you, but just know more resources are coming. And as they are released, we're going to update our website with those resources, and of course I will present them on the webcast. So the 6 programs that we're going to discuss today, I'm going to talk about them in a more general sense, and then I'll get into a couple of them specifically. So one thing to keep in mind is that we updated College for All Texans. So let me load that for you. Let me go back. So College for All Texans is our public-facing website that communicates to the public on how to apply for college, how to pay for college, and how to get through the process. So on this page, we have a dedicated types of financial aid page, and on there we have an exemptions link and we have a waivers link. So it does break out the 2 types of programs. And so for today's discussion, we're only talking about exemptions because each of those 6 is an exemption program. Waivers are separate. Exemptions allow certain types of people, both Texas residents and non-Texas residents, to be able to pay for their tuition, and that is sometimes includes the fees and other things depending on the program. So as you see, we did update this list to be alphabetical. It was kind of alphabetical before, but now we've cleaned it up so that you can find these 6 programs more easily. So you can see the children of disabled, education benefits here, we have Good Neighbor here. So all of the 6 pages have been updated to be more user-friendly and clear for the intended audience, which again is the public. For the institutions, what we've done is we have gone and created program guidelines. And if you're not in financial aid, you may not be familiar with the type of program guidelines that we produce in this area of financial aid services. If you go to the coordinating board's main website and you go to the top-hand banner, Institutional Resources and Programs, Student Financial Aid Programs has an abundance of information. This is where we release all of the updates from our area and that financial aid accesses the most. Under Program Resources, you're going to find different topics here, and Exemption and Waivers is the one that we've been working hard to update. And you'll see each of the 6 on here. We have created guidelines, and on some of them there's even additional documents which I'll go through in a moment. But you can see that you can access all of these things here, and then we even have an exemption and waiver chart at the bottom, which we try and review and update annually, so you can have a copy of that. So let me toggle back to my presentation real quick just to make sure I'm on track. Okay, so some of the general overarching requirements of exemption and waivers for these 6 programs I wanted to talk about first. One of those being eligible courses, continuation of eligibility, hardship provisions, and selective service. Most exemption programs have these requirements, but because there's so many intricacies to these programs, I'm only going to blanket talk about these 6 because again, you get onto a totally separate exemption and now it's totally different. So for these programs, let's talk about the eligible courses. In order to exempt the cost of tuition and fees, the eligible courses have to be formula funded. And if you're familiar with formula funding, or if you work in the registrar's office, you'll know which courses those are. The system that you use should identify the classes as formula funded. If they are not formula funded, you cannot exempt the tuition for those. That's an overarching law under Texas Education Code 542002. I have it linked there. Now, in addition to that overarching concept, there are some exemption programs that only apply to specific courses or degree plans. For example, if a student's doing the firefighters taking fire science courses, they can't just, it's not any course related to that program. It may be specific to their fire science curriculum. In addition, the peace officer taking certain courses is only for criminal justice courses. It's not for every course within their degree plan. So you kind of have to go and read the guidelines line by line to understand and absorb all of these. But again, in general, exemption programs can only cover formula funded courses. Okay, moving on. So back in 2014, the legislature passed a law, which is 54.2001. If you're familiar with exemption and waivers, this is a common law that is discussed because it is an overarching restriction that makes sure that students are meeting academic standards and that they're not going to school too long to receive the benefit indefinitely. So before 2014, there really wasn't any limitations put on students getting exemption and waivers. And as you know, exemptions are getting rid of or reducing tuition, so we needed some kind of standard for these students. So the way that this works is after initially getting the exemption, the student can continue to receive the exemption if they're meeting the program criteria, but also if they're meeting the institutional GPA or SAP. And this is for both graduate and undergraduate students, depending on the program. Some exemptions only apply to undergraduates. Some allow for both undergrads and grads. Again, you'll have to read the guidelines, the administrative code, and the statute for each program to make sure that you understand exactly what's required for those, but that's why we created those guidelines, is to kind of map that out clearer for each program. A student may not continue to receive an exemption while enrolled as an undergrad if they've enrolled in hours considered to be excessive under Texas Education Code 54.014. Again, if you're familiar with this, this does restrict a student from taking too many courses, so the exemption's only going to cover them up to a certain point as an undergrad student, because the idea is the student is going to go on to receive a bachelor's degree, and after that point, depending on the credit load, they would be charged additional tuition, but we're not going to continue to exempt them from that tuition going forward. Hardship provisions. Also under 54.2001, they included a hardship provision that allows the institution to grant an exception from meeting the GPA or the excess undergraduate hours by allowing them to submit paperwork or go through a process at your institution to continue to receive the benefit. So each institution is required to have a policy, but the institution can determine what they will consider a hardship. What's written in the statute are things like illnesses, taking care of a loved one, military service, and then they have a kind of general one that says the institution can decide what additional ones they want to choose. So if you don't have a policy currently, you will want to revisit that statute and make sure that you create something for students so that they have the ability to apply, and you can have a process in place to approve those hardships. The last one is selective service. This one is more familiar with financial aid. This is something that we release each year in the program guidelines, which are in these new guidelines, but male students cannot receive financial assistance without filing a selective service status statement that indicates whether they're registered or exempt. And if they're not registered for selective service, then they wouldn't qualify. So the only exception we included here is the way that it's written in a lot of the program rules are that the public community colleges don't have to have this signed statement. And selective service has kind of been a hot topic for the last 2 years on the requirements and when to collect it. So if you have questions, I recommend working with financial aid to determine how to collect this statement. And if you want to contact me directly with additional questions, I'm here to help with those. And as the months go by, I'm anticipating some of this getting to be clearer on when to collect the statement, so I will be releasing additional information on these webcasts. So as of right now, this is the current process. It is required, and again, just contact me with questions. Okay, so I am going to pull up one of the guidelines real quick because I want to show you what they look like. And the program that I decided to show you on today's webcast is the Children of Disabled and Deceased Firefighters and Law Enforcement Officers. This is one of the more complex programs that we have and that the coordinating board is involved in. So as you can see, as I scroll through, each of the documents that was created has a table of contents, and it has the information linked throughout to the education code. It talks about who can participate in the program, and this is the most helpful part, is the eligibility piece, in my opinion, because it breaks down the application process, who's responsible for what, and it's really much more informative than trying to read the statute. If you ever go onto the Texas Education Code, it is not the most user-friendly document there is out there. So these are intended to help navigate through these complexities of these programs. So, please print them, take a look at them, and always reference the bottom where we put the as of date at the bottom to make sure that if they do get updated, you have the most recent copy. For this program in particular, we now have within the back, we have an application process that we put in there. Because I kind of oversee this at the coordinating board, I found that this was one of the most confusing things for employers, students, and schools to go through. How to figure out if a student is eligible for this program. So now within the guidelines, you'll notice that there's the full application process. It's broken down by steps 1, 2, and 3. It has embedded resource documents, which I'm going to go through one by one. But if the school prints the guidelines and prints these forms, it's going to be a lot easier to navigate than trying to decipher on College for All Texans, because that's where the procedure was previously. So step 1 is employer certification for this program. If the parent was injured or was their injury resulted in death, the employer has to complete a certification letter on official letterhead. And what we've done now is we've updated what this looks like so that the employer can go on, you can send this to them, they can dump this text into the letterhead, and then they fill it in here. It just much easier than our prior form, and it also allows them to call us with questions here at the coordinating board. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but you can see that this is the instructions for the employer. The second step is the supporting documents. So what generally happens is we get information from the employer, but we don't have a lot of information from the student, such as where they're going to be attending school, how are they related to the parent, and that kind of thing. So we created a supporting documents form for the student, and they can fill this out and send it into the coordinating board so that we can determine eligibility and route off their eligibility paperwork to the correct place at the institution. So you'll notice it asks some questions about who the student is, where they're going to attend school, and then it requires that they send to the coordinating board things such as their birth certificate or a death certificate. Okay. Lastly, there is the step 3, which is the eligibility determination. Once the coordinating board receives the documents from the employer and the student, we review those, and then we issue out an eligibility determination letter. So the institution should not issue an exemption unless they receive this determination letter. And we try and get those out within 24 to 48 hours, and we email those to the institution. So it is a rather fast process. But the disconnect that I'm finding for most of these situations is that there's a confusion between this program and another program. So today I would like to go through it in detail. The two programs that are the most confused are 54.351, which is what I just went through. And there's another program under Texas Education Code 54.354. So what are those differences? We're going to look at those. Don't be overwhelmed. I know it's a really massive chart, but I think that this is going to help lay out the differences more clearly for everyone. So on the left-hand side, you have the program I just talked about, which is 54.351, and it's the children of disabled or deceased firefighters and law enforcement officers. On the right-hand side, you have a very similar program, which is education benefits for certain survivors. The main difference between these two is going to be related to the date of the injury and the type of injury that occurred. So when you look at the two, if the parent was injured in the line of duty and the injury resulted in death that occurred before September 1st of 2000, that would be the program on the left-hand side. If the death occurred on or after September 1st, you'll notice I highlighted on or after September 1st, then it would fall under this program. Now, if the parent was injured which resulted in disability at any time, that means today, 10 years ago, or 2 years from now, it's going to be under this code. And I think that that's where often it gets confusing. So the coordinating board does issue eligibility for this program. The institution does it for this program. Another big difference is the age requirement. So for the left-hand program, the children must initially apply before the age of 21. They do give an extra year if the student was able to participate in the special ed program, but it's 21 is the cutoff, so they do have to initially apply. Now, with the other program, the caveat is that a dependent child of the person who died in the line of duty must have been under the age of 18 on the date of death. So that means that they were a dependent eligible child. Now, they don't have to apply within a certain amount of time, but that death does have to occur under the age of 18. The spouse can also apply at any age. So this would apply to at any point when they decide to go back to school. The application process, I think I just mentioned, the difference between the two is one, on the left-hand side, the children of disabled, those would go through the coordinating board and we issue out the letter. The program, the education benefits for the survivors, those are determined directly through the institution, and the institution needs to determine what paperwork is necessary. So the institution would work with the employer, they can collect whatever they need from the student, so that's all done directly through the school, not through the coordinating board. Enrollment requirements. The 54.351, you have to be under the age of 26 at the start of the term of semester. At the age of 26, you no longer qualify. And also once you, well, I'm kind of hopping around now. I'll just keep going down the list. You do have to be an undergraduate student to qualify for this program, and you can only be taking undergraduate courses. And like we discussed just a few moments ago, you do have to be registered for selective service or be exempt. With the other program that's administered directly through the school, the student has to be enrolled full-time. They have to be taking undergraduate courses in an undergraduate program and be registered. For the disabled program, the courses have to be formula funded for both. Like I said, that's an overarching concept. So the student does have to be taking courses that are formula funded. The exemption for tuition is definitely different for the two programs. The 54.351, it covers the first 120 undergraduate registered hours. So if a student comes into the institution, they have already registered and taken 60 credits. When we issue the eligibility letter, you would need to know that they are only going to get the remaining 60. They don't get 120, they only get 120 registered credits is when they get cut off, or age 26, whichever comes first. Under this program, there's no living allowance or textbook assistance, unlike the other program. For the survivor program, all tuition, all fees up to 200 hours or until a bachelor's degree is earned. It also covers living expenses such as housing, food, if you have institutional housing and the student chooses to reside in the housing. That does have to be covered by the institution, and the institution also must cover an allowance for textbooks. So as you can see, the one on the right hand side is a more liberal program. It does have some extra benefits, like I said, the food and the books and all of that, but it also goes longer, up to 200 hours. So I realize what I just said was a lot of information, and to be honest, this is not even all of it. If you go and print the guidelines, there's additional layers on each of these programs that are critical for people to understand to make sure that you're administering them correctly. So definitely print them out, and as you go through them, send us a contact us so that we can work through these questions together. But the easiest way for me personally to understand and remember these is that 54.351 are related to disabilities. 54.354 are related to injuries that resulted in death. And the reason I say that is because the date there for a death occurring before 2000 are becoming fewer and fewer at this point because a student couldn't qualify after the age of 21. There's only a couple more years in which this program will be applicable for the students. So it's in a few more years, the left-hand program will just be for disability. The right-hand program will just be for injuries that result in death. So now that we went through those very, very quickly and thoroughly, I'm going to move on to the last program. Again, different offices who've joined this webcast may or may not be involved in Good Neighbor, so I encourage you to stay on and listen to see who it applies to and what the process is. But the Good Neighbor program is technically called the Students from Other Nations of the American Hemisphere. That's what the statute is called, but it was named Good Neighbor years back to be more friendly and to describe the nature of the program, which is to encourage people from other countries to come to Texas to explore education and then go back to their country, and therefore creating a beneficial link between the two countries. You'll notice that the word scholarship has been removed from this program, and we're working to update the rule. And the reason is because this is not a scholarship, it's an exemption program, and there are no funds related to Good Neighbor. The institution is the one that exempts the tuition, and the coordinating board has no involvement whatsoever with the funding of the program. So today what I would like to do is show you some of the resources that we have for Good Neighbor, and then I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of how to submit a student. So if you're new to Good Neighbor, you kind of have an idea of how that works. So first and foremost, I'm going to go to the Student Financial Aid Programs webpage again. Let me backtrack a little here. Okay, so this is the exemption page that I showed everybody, and you'll notice down in the list we have Good Neighbor. Not only do we have the guidelines, which were just released in December, but we also have online recommendation instructions, and you'll notice again there's two here. One was from last year and one was from this year. We always keep multiple versions so that you can see if something changed from year to year. So today I'm going to show you the online 2021, which is this upcoming fall. These are the instructions that you'll use in order to submit applications to the coordinating board. So the nice part about these instructions is it breaks everything down step by step. It talks about how to get access to submit students, which is through our CB Pass portal. So it talks about how you sign up for an account, kind of how the form works, and just kind of technical information. It talks about student priority and the need for institutions to prioritize, and the coordinating board does not tell schools how to rank or prioritize eligible students. If you have an application out there for your Good Neighbor students, it's up to you to come up with a unique priority ranking. I've heard some schools, they will go based on GPA, say, the highest GPAs get ranked highest. And then we've got others that do, okay, renewal students get priority because we want them to stay here and continue to go to school. We've got others that say, initial year students should get the priority because they've never had the award before. So there's all sorts of methodologies on how you're going to prioritize students, but the coordinating board doesn't determine that for you. As an institution, you have to take your set population of eligible applicants and decide how you want to prioritize those. As you go through the form, it asks you a variety of eligibility questions. So all of those should be determined in advance before you submit them to the coordinating board. And as we go through the form together, you'll see that it will prevent you from submitting somebody if they're not eligible. As you go through the instructions, again, this is what I'm going to be doing just in a moment more live. It does walk through how to answer the questions, the justifications behind them on why you won't be able to proceed if they're ineligible, and then how to sign the form. And once you submit a student to the coordinating board, you will receive an email notification, and then once we do our process to select the recipients, then a final notice will go out, which is, I believe, in April we send that. It really just depends on when we run our program here. But the instruction shows an example of each of the steps and what the emails look like and how all of that works. But as of right now, I'm the main go-to person for Good Neighbor. So at the end of this, I'll provide my email. So if you're on this thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm still really, really overwhelmed by Good Neighbor, I completely understand that we've had a lot of new people for Good Neighbor in the last few years. And so it's somewhat mysterious for schools who've never done it before, and that's what I'm here for, is to walk you through the submission process, eligibility, anything to do with the selection after our program is run, anything like that. So without further ado, I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint and show you the flow of the submission process. So this chart that I'm showing you on the screen is part of the guidelines. So you'll see this in there if you print those out. But in a nutshell, like I talked about, to submit someone to the coordinating board, you do have to have form access. So that means that you have to create an account through the coordinating board through our CB Pass portal. That's what it's called. If you don't have an account, you do have to request access. First-time users, we have an instruction guide which is linked to the guidelines, so you can pull that up. And then what we talked about is prioritizing your students. So once you have all your students, you know they're eligible, you've got them all ranked, you've reviewed that they're eligible through the program rules and everything else, then you're ready to go online and fill in each of the forms. Then you certify the form. Once it's submitted and we receive all the recommendations from every institution, we run a program that does the selection process. So this is just kind of the overarching flow here. So let's do one together. Once you log into CB Pass, this is what the screen is going to initially look like. It is going to have these pre-populated. So this upcoming year is 2021. It'll pull in your code and your institution's name based on your account. In the event these are wrong for some reason, you would need to reach out before you submit anybody. As you go through the form, if you make a mistake, you do have the ability to hit clear form while you're filling it out. Once you've submitted a student, there is no way to go back and correct it. You would have to have us cancel the application from here. So that's just a heads up, is, you know, as you're going through these, I would create some kind of process and tracking system as you go down your list of students. You'll want to enter them one by one, and I would go in order. That way you don't skip someone in the priority. That's very important. So let's take a look at how the portal works. So the first step is you click the student priority, and every time you have submitted someone, it will no longer allow you to enter that priority. So number one, I have already entered priority 1. I've entered actually all the way up to priority 12 at this point. So the first one I can do that is clear is 12. The first section is student information. So you'll do the first name, middle initial, and then you'll type in the last name. Again, if you mess up, you can always hit that reset form. Then you'll put in the student's date of birth. So here I'm going to do February 4th, 1985. And then you'll want to do the type of student ID, either social security number or the student's institutional ID, which is the more common one. If they are classified as a U.S. resident, if you select yes, it's not going to allow you to continue. They cannot be a U.S. resident. Most of these students are international students on a visa. If they've applied for U.S. residency, not eligible. You have to select no. Selective service, we've talked about a few times now. They do have to be registered or exempt. If you select not registered, it will not go through. Most students here on a visa or internationally are exempt from that process. Coordinating board, make sure that if you select yes, you put the person. We don't prioritize people based on the coordinating board, but we do ask that you specify the person so that we know if there's anyone that's coming through the system that way. The next one is, have you ever received the exemption through Good Neighbor program? Like we talked about before, for this program, they have to be meeting institutional GPA requirements in order to get another award. So you'll either select yes and then indicate if they're meeting the requirement. If they've never received it before, then you'll put no. And this one I'm just going to put yes, they're meeting the GPA. How long has a student lived in the Western Hemisphere? You'll indicate that based on the documents they provide to you. If you don't know, then you can put 5 and 0. Country of birth, all of these are supposed to be the same. In the event you have a student that submits documentation that the 3 countries don't align, it is going to flag that, and it's going to require that you indicate the reason. And we do see this every so often where maybe as a baby or even as an adult they change citizenship or they move to another country. So you'll just want to put as much information in here as possible so that we can review that, and then we will either approve or deny it once we have the reasoning. And usually we'll deny it just because we need more clarification. So don't panic if it gets denied. It doesn't mean that it's permanently denied. Okay, moving down to the certification. Once you're ready to go, you enter your name under the program officer, and then once you've filled out this form, it's going to auto-populate each time, which is nice. But then you can either type your name or you can draw it in. I like to draw. You hit sign, and then you're going to enter your telephone number. That email address populates automatically from your account. And then you're going to hit submit. And like I said, once you hit the submit button, then it's going to generate an email as long as it goes through. And I think I showed you these emails right here. So this is what they will look like, and it'll tell you the name of the person and the priority you submitted. Again, my recommendation, because this is my 3rd year doing Good Neighbor, is keep a list and go from one priority to the next so that you don't skip one, because I've seen that several times now, and it can be kind of a mess to clean up because we have to go and cancel a bunch of applications to get them in order again. And it's also important because the program that we have here at the coordinating board does everything based on priority. So it goes from priority 1 through all schools, and it assigns them to that country. So if you miss a priority, you could be, I don't want to say jeopardizing, sounds pretty dramatic, but it can change the end results. So just be very careful, and if you do end up making a mistake or you have questions, you could always call, and I can look at it for you on our end. So that is Good Neighbor. Again, the resources are out there to help you guys. Guidelines are out there to clarify the eligibility part of the program, and the deadline again is March 15th. So please make sure you're working on those submissions and getting your access if you need it, and calling me with additional training as needed. So that is it. Let me see if I can move to the next slide. We are about 10 minutes from the end. I always leave this part open for questions. If you can start sending me questions that you have, I'll be checking those in just a moment. My contact information is on the screen right now. You can email me. That's the best way to reach me. Again, you can use the Contact Us link, but if it's very specific to this presentation, you can send that to me directly. I have a webcast survey that I created, and that's for me to get additional ideas or individual feedback on how I'm doing. I do really welcome that feedback, so please take the time to go on and let me know how much information you need or how good or bad I did. The phone number right below that is the institutional phone line that I already mentioned. And then we have our Texas Financial Aid Information Center line, which is dedicated to the public. That can be students, high school students, legislators, anyone can use that phone line to give us a call on that. All right, so this is where I open it up for questions. I'm going to navigate over to my screen and see what I got over here. I saw somebody was having issues with the video feed. Hopefully that was just a isolated incident, but okay. So Jessica, it says for 354, does the institution have to cover the cost of housing and food if they choose to live off campus? If the student chooses to live off campus, then no. Now, if you have institutional housing and they want to live on campus, but there's no space available, that's different because it's just a matter of logistics. There's not enough. So you would have to pay a comparable amount that they would be paying to live on campus. But no, if they choose that on their own, then no, you don't have to pay for that. If possible, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Yes. I'm going to show you really quick where we store the webcasts and all PowerPoints so that you can see that. Let me pull that up really quick. So if you go to Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, under Stay Connected, we have a dedicated webcast page. On here, we're about to revamp this page, but at the very bottom, you'll see Webcast Archives. And on there, I have all my prior webcasts and then also the PowerPoint. So there, you don't have to listen to me all over again. Although I know you love to do that, so feel free at any point. That's why I put them on YouTube. Just kidding. But yeah, we do put the PDF out there so that you can have the PowerPoint and reference it later. And we also will be continuing to update the exemption and waiver page. So for example, that chart that I showed you, we're going to be creating an actual PDF that you could print out. But again, there's additional layers. So make sure you get the guidelines, because while the chart is fantastic, I use it myself, it still is missing some small details that are useful. So I'd hate for you to use it and then miss a critical factor on there. So, okay. Once we submit the student information in priority, can we go back and edit? No, you cannot edit the priorities. You can call me and we can work out cancellations and then you can redo it. But it's not, there's no way for the institution to reprioritize or cancel on your own. But after you've submitted somebody, if you make a mistake or you need to redo it, we can do that if it's before the deadline. So just reach out. Hopefully answered. Let me see. I see somebody's typing. A few more minutes. Any questions out there in the universe that I can answer? I probably should have said that first. I don't see any more coming through. As you think of your questions, because I know that I went over quite a bit of information, feel free to send that, contact us. That's what we're here for. We have people that work on those every single day, and we will get your responses as quickly as possible. Please join me next month for the webcast. It's at the same time. It's the second Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Tuesday at 2. We'll send out the topics like we always do, and we'll post them on this webcast page so you can see in advance what we're going to talk about. And I really, really appreciate y'all joining. I feel like this is such a really great opportunity for me to get to know y'all. I met a bunch of y'all last year at the end of the year at some of these conferences, so thank you again. We have one more question that came through. By any chance, do you know of any aid for continuing education? We are currently only have TPEG. You know, I might need to mull that one over. Nothing's coming to mind immediately, but that doesn't mean that there isn't. Like I said, there's so many programs out there that, you know, we're chipping away at, making sure that we understand all the complexities on what they cover and what they don't. So I will see what I can find, and if you want to send that through Contact Us or email me directly, that would be helpful so that I don't lose track. I will get back to you. Tonya, can we get clarification for the statement for public schools and selective service? I would go out to the statement in the guidelines, read it, because there's a lot more information than what was provided on my slide. But once you go through that, and it is for public schools and private schools for selective service, once you get through that information, if you still have questions, definitely reach out and I can call you or we can schedule some time to have a discussion about it. Alrighty, we've got 4 minutes. Anyone else? I'm gonna wrap it up. All right, well, I appreciate you again. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful day. I will talk to you very soon. The email is on the presentation. Let me pull it up one last time as I close out, and I will talk to y'all soon. Thank you so much.